Welcome to class, our first class together. I'm going to provide some slides to try to describe some of the concepts and tell you a little bit about myself. Thank you. I have a Master's of Science degree in Computer Science from Binghamton University. I graduated in 2001. I also have a Bachelor's degree in Computer Science from SUNY Oswego. I've been a software developer for over 16 years working at various companies. I've been an online instructor for the past 11 years. I've instructed over 20 different classes. And this is everything from object-oriented programming to compiler theory. I've been working with Android and iOS since 2010. I've created many different classes at many different universities, including beginning and advanced Android classes. I've also been using Kotlin for about a year now. Currently, I'm a software developer at Xerox Corporation. I mainly program in C++ and PHP. I also like to concentrate on object-oriented languages and mobile programming. It's a ton of fun and I love Android. Lastly, I focus on writing high-quality code. I think a lot of students kind of lack this focus, and so I'm going to try to emphasize writing high-quality code in this class. Some of the topics that we're going to cover in this class, we're going to start off with an overview of Kotlin. We'll talk about the goals of Kotlin, mainly that it's concise, expressive, null-safe, and works with Java, its interoperability. We'll then move on to language features, talking about static typing, compile time checking of types. Kotlin also supports object-oriented languages as well as functional. And then some of the really big concepts, lambdas, we'll talk about that and how you can pass around blocks of code. Follow that up with identifying the advantages of using Kotlin, mainly that it's efficient, reliable, and easy to learn. It's important to understand the language, its advantages, and the language's features before you can really start using the language. We'll follow that up with talking about static typing and type inference in detail. We'll move on to mutable and immutable variables. This is really creating variables with the val and var keywords. We'll then talk about strings and string templates. String templates is a really nice feature where you can place $ symbols inside strings and those variables will automatically be interpolated. We'll talk about the any and any types. Any is similar to the java.lang object. It's the top level object in Kotlin. Unit and nothing types. Unit is similar to a void. Nothing is when you return nothing from a function. This may seem kind of odd, but everything in Kotlin is a type, and all types get returned somehow. Smart cast. Smart cast is a great feature that will do automatic casting for you. The compiler will automatically know the last time you used the is operator and cast it to whatever you did it on. Is similar to the instance of operator. Basic operators. We'll talk about logical and arithmetic operators, pretty much the same that are in Java, plus, minus. The big difference is they have matching functions, so you can easily override them. We'll talk about nullable types, which is you use the question mark before variables. I mentioned that Android is a null-safe language, so you got to be able to identify when things cannot be null. Safe call and else operators, these help support null safety. Safe cast operator, similar to this as well, when you want to cast something and first make sure it's not null. If statements and while loops. These are typical construct of a language, and we'll talk about how these can also be expressions. The when construct, similar to the switch statement in Java, but much more powerful. A really good addition. We'll talk about functions, how to declare and use them. Functions are a big part of the language. You can create member functions, but you can also create top-level functions, functions that have nothing to do with any enclosing class. As I mentioned, we'll talk about top-level functions, not part of any class. Member and local functions. Default name parameters, a nice technique that will make code more readable. And default parameters can also reduce overloading. Infix calls. Variable number of arguments, similar to the Java, but uses a keyword. Extension functions, a great feature of the Kotlin programming language where you can add new functionality to existing classes that you don't even have the source code for. The Kotlin standard library, some core functionality that's provided for you mainly through the use of extension functions that make it easier to communicate with Java APIs and also provide many nice features to make things easier. Operator overloading. There's no operator overloading in Java, but there is in Kotlin. Lambda expressions. An awesome thing where you can pass around blocks of code. It is in Java 8, but Android includes Java 6, so you can't do it in Android apps. Higher order functions. This is where you can pass lambdas to functions as a parameter and where functions can return functions. Object-oriented concepts. We'll do a review of that, or if you're new, we'll cover it in detail. Classes and constructors. We'll talk about primary and secondary constructors in Kotlin. Properties, which are similar to member variables, but they have the accessors automatically generated for you. Inner and nested classes. Inheritance and interfaces, using the open keyword. Interfaces can also have default implementations like Java 8, and interfaces can have attributes. Singletons and companion objects. There's a nice keyword in Kotlin named object that will create a single instance. Makes singletons very easy to create. Exceptions. We'll follow that up with generics, the ability to have this, the same behavior for different types. Collections. There are a ton of information on collections where you can communicate with the Java collection class. It's easier in Kotlin. A lot of new features. Reflection and annotations, concurrency, and then we'll dive into Android practices for Kotlin, some tips, also some ways to use Kotlin on Android specifically. And then lastly, we'll have many code alongs for Android projects written in Kotlin. This will help you become familiar with writing Kotlin for Android apps. By the end of this course, you're going to be able to write advanced Kotlin programs. We're not just covering the basics of Kotlin. We're covering all the details of Kotlin, all the program language features. You'll be able to write intermediate Android apps. We're not covering the Android APIs in detail via the lecture. We're going through code alongs that will help you become familiar with the Android platform. You'll be able to write efficient, high-quality Kotlin code. We'll have cohesive classes, low coupling. It will also be very expressive. You'll be able to find and fix your errors. You'll have good debugging skills. And you'll understand all the aspects of the Kotlin programming language, from beginner to advanced. But lastly, you're going to have fun. I like to have fun in my classes, and if this is not enjoyable, I really don't want you to stay in the class, because you're paying good money for this. You want to have fun in the class. So that's really the most important thing. Thank you for listening.